A passing driver on Highway 90 outside San Antonio spots something that doesn't belong on the scorching Texas roadside. It's June 9th, 1986, and the morning sun is already brutal, shimmering off the asphalt in waves. The driver slows down, squinting at what looks like a discarded mannequin. But as he gets closer, his stomach drops. It's not a mannequin. It's a woman. She's completely unclothed, lying motionless on the desolate stretch of road, positioned in a way that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His hands shake as he calls the police immediately. The woman is 30-year-old Kathleen Lipscomb. She's a dedicated nurse, a mother of 2 young children named Carl and Laura, and someone who should be at work at the hospital right now, caring for patients like she does every single day. Instead, she's gone. Her body dumped on the side of a highway like garbage. And here's what makes this case absolutely chilling. The person who ended her life wore the uniform of the United States Air Force. He was trusted, respected, decorated. But this isn't a story about honor or duty. This is about what happens when someone builds their entire life on a lie, rises through the ranks on fraud and deception, and then faces the terrifying possibility of exposure. This is about what happens when one person threatens to destroy a carefully constructed facade with a single phone call. Kathleen wasn't supposed to be on that highway. She was supposed to be picking up her kids from their dad's place the night before. She never showed up. Think about that for a second. A mother doesn't just forget to pick up her children. Kathleen was going through a difficult divorce from her husband, Bill Lipscomb, an Air Force Master Sergeant stationed at Lackland Air Force Base. The custody battle was getting ugly, really ugly, and Kathleen had a secret weapon she planned to use. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Sunday evening rolled around, and Kathleen's ex-husband Bill did exactly what a concerned father would do when the mother of his children didn't arrive. He drove the kids to her apartment. Nobody answered. He left notes. He made phone calls to friends. His performance was absolutely perfect. Monday morning brought panic. Kathleen's co-workers at the hospital started whispering. She never missed work. Something was terribly wrong. Then came the call nobody wanted to receive. A body had been found on the highway. When detectives arrived at the scene, they found something that would become crucial to solving this case. Kathleen's clothes weren't just thrown aside or scattered around. They were rolled, not casually folded like someone in a hurry might do. Rolled with military precision, the kind of precision you learn in basic training. The kind of precision that becomes second nature after years in the service. The kind of precision that's drilled into you until you do it automatically, without thinking. The autopsy revealed she'd been strangled to death. The medical examiner found ligature marks consistent with an electrical cord wrapped around her throat. She'd fought, but not for long. The perpetrator had been strong, determined, and knew exactly what he was doing. The medical examiner found something else. Chinese food in her stomach, barely digested. That gave them a timeline. Sunday evening was when she last ate. Sunday evening was when she was supposed to pick up her kids. Sunday evening was when someone wrapped a cord around her neck and squeezed until her life drained away. The medical examiner also found evidence of intercourse within 24 hours of ending. But here's the thing. Bill Lipscomb had gotten a vasectomy. The presence of sperm in Kathleen's body meant she'd been intimate with someone else. That detail would send investigators down multiple rabbit holes, chasing suspects who had nothing to do with her ending. But here's where it gets interesting. Investigators found 4 strands of red hair on her clothing, not just any red hair. Dyed red hair. Hair without roots, which meant no DNA testing even if the technology had been advanced enough in 1986. And, back in those days, without the DNA technology we have today, those hairs were basically useless for identification beyond their color. But they pointed investigators in a very specific direction. Or rather, they pointed investigators in the wrong direction, which was exactly what someone wanted. Someone wanted them to think this ending was about something else entirely. Someone had spent time staging this scene, making it look like something it wasn't. Someone smart enough to understand how investigations worked. Someone with training. Bill Lipscomb was the obvious first suspect. Divorces can get messy. Custody battles can get downright vicious. Statistics show that domestic violence spikes during separations. When you add money, children, and wounded pride into the mix, people can become capable of things they'd never normally consider. But when police examined him thoroughly, they found no defensive wounds, no scratches on his face or arms, no bruises, nothing that suggested he'd been in a physical confrontation. And his alibi? Rock solid. His children, Carl and Laura, told investigators their dad had been home with them all weekend. Think about that. A perfect alibi from the most innocent witnesses possible. Who would question children? So investigators started looking elsewhere, convinced they were chasing the wrong suspect. Enter Dr. David Pearl. He was a married physician, a gynecologist who worked with Kathleen at the hospital. He was handsome, successful, and unfortunately for his wife, a serial cheater. He was also having a secret affair with Kathleen. Dr. Pearl had promised Kathleen he'd leave his wife for her. He'd promised her a future together. A real relationship, a chance at happiness. You know how this story goes. Classic pattern. He'd made those same promises to other women over the years. He never kept them. Affairs were fun. Divorce was complicated. Dr. Pearl had been with Kathleen that weekend. The timeline worked perfectly. The motive worked. A married doctor having an affair with a nurse? Maybe she threatened to tell his wife. Maybe she demanded he leave his family. Maybe she wanted more than he was willing to give. Investigators pressed hard, bringing him in for multiple interrogations. But Pearl maintained his innocence with absolute conviction. He admitted the affair freely, but insisted he had nothing to do with her ending. He didn't do this. At least, that's what he kept saying. Then there was Vincent Robideau. He was Kathleen's nursing colleague and her neighbor. They lived in the same apartment complex, saw each other almost daily at work and at home. And here's what made him look guilty as sin. The day after Kathleen's body was discovered, Robideau vanished. Just disappeared. Poof. Gone. He abandoned his job, didn't collect his paycheck, left his entire San Antonio life behind, without a word to anyone. When investigators finally tracked him down in Galveston weeks later, his explanation was almost too simple to believe. He told them a broken relationship had sent him running. He was heartbroken, devastated, couldn't face his life anymore. He needed to escape, to start over somewhere new. Nothing more sinister than that. Just a broken-hearted man running from emotional pain. Was it suspicious timing? Absolutely. Was it evidence of anything criminal? Not really. The case went cold. Evidence pointed in every direction and nowhere. The real perpetrator remained invisible. 2 years passed. 2 long, agonizing years. The investigation had stalled completely, collecting dust in file cabinets while Bill Lipscomb continued living his life. But Kathleen's mother, Nadine Adams, refused to let her daughter's case die. She was a mother who'd lost her child to violence, and she wasn't about to let time or bureaucracy stand in her way. She'd noticed things about Bill that didn't add up. little details that bothered her, kept her awake at night. The way he'd remarried so quickly after Kathleen's ending, barely waiting a respectful amount of time before moving on with his new wife, Beverly. How he seemed to be living quite comfortably on the $315,000 life insurance policy he'd taken out on Kathleen. And here's the detail that really stuck with her. One of those policies. He'd purchased it after Kathleen filed for divorce. Let that sink in for a moment. After his wife said she wanted a divorce, after she made it clear their marriage was over, after she started the legal process to separate their lives, Bill Lipscomb took out additional life insurance on her life. Who does that? Who buys life insurance on someone they're divorcing unless they're planning for that person to not be around much longer? Nadine and Kathleen's sister, Darlene Coons, pooled their money, their savings, everything they could scrape together. They hired a private investigator named Tom Bevins. Sometimes you need fresh eyes on old evidence. Sometimes you need someone who isn't bound by departmental politics or case overload. Sometimes a family's determination is the only thing standing between a cold case and justice. Bevins started digging through Kathleen's personal belongings with meticulous care, looking for anything the police might have missed, any small detail that could break this case open. He examined photographs, letters, receipts, appointment cards, anything that might give him insight into Kathleen's life in those final months. He found her diary. And inside that diary, he found the keys to everything. In Kathleen's diary, Bevins discovered 2 entries that would crack this case wide open and change everything they thought they knew about what happened. The first mentioned a baseball tournament and someone named Shannon Gilbert being there. Bevins did a background check on Shannon Gilbert. Turns out, she worked with Bill at the Air Force Base. And according to multiple sources, she was having an affair with Bill Lipscomb. When Bevins approached Shannon Gilbert for questioning, her reaction told him everything he needed to know. She immediately lawyered up fast. Her urgent need for legal protection spoke volumes without her saying a word. Guilty people lawyer up fast. But the second diary entry, that was the smoking gun. Kathleen had written detailed notes about Bill's cheating, not romantic cheating this time, professional cheating. Bill Lipscomb had been running a test cheating ring for the Air Force's Weighted Airman Promotion System, known as WAPS. He'd been collecting actual test questions from sergeants who'd already taken the exams, compiling them into study guides, and selling them to candidates for promotion. That's how Bill had climbed the ranks so fast. That's how he'd become a master sergeant at such a young age. His entire military career was built on fraud. And Kathleen knew about it. She had written proof. She'd threatened to turn him and his colleagues into Air Force leadership. In the middle of their custody battle, she'd made it clear, "Give up your fight for the kids, or I'll destroy your career with one phone call." For a man who'd built his entire identity on military success, this was unacceptable. The forensic psychologist sees what others missed. The private investigators convinced the Air Force Office of Special Investigations to get involved. By this time, Bill had conveniently requested a humanitarian transfer to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. He claimed he needed to be near his parents so that they could help with the children. The local sheriff's department couldn't touch him anymore. Only a FOCI had jurisdiction. They brought in Dr. Charles McDowell, a forensic psychologist. He studied the crime scene photographs for 45 minutes. That's all it took. "This scene is staged," Dr. McDowell concluded. "Someone desperately wants you to believe this was about something else entirely. It's not." He pointed out details that investigators had missed. The way Kathleen's body was positioned. Her legs were crossed in a way that suggested she'd been stored in a confined space during rigor mortis. The body being uncovered indicated something crucial. The person who dumped her wasn't the person who ended her life. Perpetrators who know their victims typically show some remnant of care or shame. They cover the body. They choose a less exposed location. This dumper showed none of that. Dr. McDowell's profile was devastatingly clear. Bill Lipscomb ended his wife's life, but someone else disposed of her body. Multiple players meant multiple opportunities for someone to crack under pressure. Sometimes the smallest voices tell the biggest truths. Kathleen's daughter, Laura, was 9 years old when her mother was taken from her. For years, she'd been too afraid of her father's temper to say anything. But as she got older, memories surfaced. Traumatic memories that she finally shared with her grandmother. Laura remembered waking up that Sunday night. She remembered her daddy being gone. His car was missing from the driveway, the perfect alibi her father had constructed. It was a lie, but Laura remembered a man named Tony taking them to dinner. But during those hours, when they were at McDonald's, their father wasn't home with them like he'd claimed. He was somewhere else, somewhere important. Everything started clicking into place. Investigators started applying pressure. They let Bill know he was being watched. Every phone call could lead to an arrest. Every knock on the door might be his downfall. The psychological warfare was deliberate and effective. But it wasn't Bill who broke first. It was his friend, Staff Sergeant Clint Nicholas Richards, the man forensic files would later call Tony Borello, to protect his identity during the original broadcast. Richards had helped Bill that night. He'd taken the children to McDonald's while Bill eliminated his problem. He'd come back later to help dispose of the evidence. Richards had found a girlfriend. She'd gotten him going to church. And in church, sitting in those pews, listening to sermons about truth and redemption, the weight of what he'd done became crushing. Religious guilt consumed him. He heard divine commands to confess his sins. Richards went to investigators and told them everything. He admitted to dumping Kathleen's body. He insisted Bill was the one who ended her life. And here's the detail that confirmed Dr. McDowell's analysis. Kathleen's body had been stored in a cedar chest. That's why her legs were positioned that way. That's why rigor mortis had set in with her legs folded. Incredibly, Richards still had the chest. Forensic testing found Kathleen's blood staining the wood. Physical proof. Evidence that survived 2 years of lies and cover-up. Dr. McDowell wanted to interrogate Bill personally. He wanted to feel Bill's anger, understand his psychology, weaponize that knowledge. The interrogation became a mental chess match. McDowell probed with calculated questions. He watched for microscopic cracks in Bill's carefully constructed facade. Then he asked the question that would end this case. "Why did you eliminate her, Bill?" Bill's response came automatically. "I don't know why I ended her life." Then he caught himself. Too late. The admission hung in the air like a smoking gun. His hasty retraction, "I did not end my wife's life," only confirmed his guilt. You can't take back words like that. You can't unring that bell. The motive was crystal clear now. Bill Lipscomb's military career was built entirely on fraud. He'd stolen test answers. He'd climbed to Master Sergeant through deception, not merit. For years, he'd worn stripes he hadn't earned. But Kathleen held the key to destroying everything. She'd discovered his cheating during their marriage's final days. She wielded it as the ultimate weapon in their custody battle. The blackmail was subtle, but devastating. Expose him unless he gave up his fight for the children. For a man who'd built his entire life on calculated deception, this was unacceptable. One phone call from Kathleen would end everything. His career, his reputation, his military pension, his identity. That Sunday evening, Bill orchestrated every detail with military precision. He sent the children away with Richards, creating his alibi while clearing the stage. When Kathleen arrived to find them missing, confusion turned to confrontation. He decided it would be their last argument. Bill strangled her with an electrical cord. He violated her body before or after she was gone. The exact sequence remains disputed. He stored her in the cedar chest. Later that night, after putting his children to bed, Richards returned to help dump the body on that desolate highway. The scene was staged to look like something else entirely. The red hairs were deliberate misdirection, designed to send investigators chasing phantom suspects. Bill hid behind military protocol and fabricated grief while everyone looked elsewhere. But he'd underestimated one thing: a mother's love. Not his love for his children, but Nadine's love for her daughter. And he'd underestimated the power of science, psychology, and most importantly, the memories of his own children. On July 10th, 1989, 3 years after Kathleen's body was found on that highway, Bill Lipscomb was arrested. He was living in Pequoson, Virginia, with his second wife, Beverly, and Carl and Laura. The arrest brought some relief to Kathleen's family, but the nightmare was far from over. Bill pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. In 1990, a military judge at Langley Air Force Base sentenced him to life in prison. The plea agreement stipulated he'd serve no more than 60 years. The Air Force demoted him, dishonorably discharged him, and canceled all future pay. Bill was transferred to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, then later to a federal facility in Pennsylvania, and eventually to Butner Federal Medical Center in North Carolina. Clint Nicholas Richards received immunity for his cooperation. He got an honorable discharge and walked away from this nightmare with his freedom intact. But guilt became his lifelong sentence. Shannon Gilbert disappeared into the Witness Protection Program. Her identity was erased, her life rewritten. The affair that had been part of this terrible equation became a footnote in a case file. Dr. David Pearl returned to his medical practice, forever haunted by how close he'd come to being convicted for another man's crime. The investigation cleared his name, but those kinds of scars don't heal. Carl and Laura grew up knowing their father ended their mother's life. They witnessed justice prevail, but they also carried trauma that would echo through their entire lives. Here's where this story takes an unexpected turn that will make your blood boil. Bill Lipscomb was supposed to remain in prison until December 23rd, 2025. That was his scheduled release date after serving the reduced 60-year sentence. But on May 14th, 2021, after serving approximately 32 years, Bill Lipscomb walked out of federal prison a free man. Let that sink in. The man who meticulously planned his wife's ending, who violated her body, who stored her in a cedar chest like a piece of unwanted furniture, who staged a crime scene to frame phantom suspects, who let his children grow up without their mother, who tried to bribe witnesses to leave the country, walked free after just 32 years. Bill Lipscomb is alive today. He's approximately 68 years old. He's living somewhere in America right now, breathing free air, while Kathleen Lipscomb has been gone for nearly 40 years. The Federal Bureau of Prisons confirms his release, though specific details about his current location remain protected. No public records indicate where he settled or what he's doing now. The man who once wore Air Force stripes and stood for honor has simply disappeared into civilian life. Kathleen's mother, Nadine Adams, and her sister, Darlene Coons, appeared on the Montel Williams Show in 2004. Darlene said something that still resonates today. "I think Bill needs to realize that he's very selfish. For a very selfish reason, he affected so very many lives. According to family members who spoke publicly, Bill Lipscomb never apologized for what he did. Not once. No expression of remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain he caused. Just silence. Carl and Laura Lipscomb would be in their late 40s now. They've chosen to live private lives, which is completely understandable. Laura was the brave child who finally told the truth about her father's absence that night. That courage helped bring her mother's perpetrator to justice. Both children have had to carry the impossible burden of being raised for a time by the man who ended their mother's life. Clint Nicholas Richards, the man who helped dispose of Kathleen's body, received immunity and kept his honorable discharge. His current whereabouts are unknown. He cooperated with investigators, which was crucial to solving the case. But he still participated in one of the most heinous acts imaginable, helping to dump a mother's body on a highway like trash. Shannon Gilbert, Bill's mistress, whose affair contributed to the toxic environment that preceded Kathleen's ending, entered witness protection and changed her identity completely. She's somewhere out there, living under a new name, with a new identity, having escaped the consequences of her involvement in this tragedy. Dr. David Pearl, who was initially suspected because of his affair with Kathleen, returned to his medical practice. By all accounts, he had nothing to do with the crime. The investigation cleared him completely, but being suspected of ending someone you cared about leaves permanent psychological scars. The case became a landmark study in forensic psychology. It's taught in universities and law enforcement academies as an example of how behavioral analysis, crime scene reconstruction, and psychological profiling can pierce through even the most carefully constructed lies. The work of Dr. Charles McDowell, Private Investigator Tom Bevins, and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations showed what's possible when multiple disciplines work together. Author Irene Pence wrote a book about the case called A Clue from the Grave, which became a bestseller and was optioned for a movie. The case was featured on Forensic Files in an episode titled True Lies, Investigation Discoveries, Scorned Love Kills, and several other true crime programs. Here's what keeps me up at night about this case. The military promotion cheating scandal that got Kathleen ended? It didn't stop anything. In 2006, 20 years after Kathleen was eliminated for threatening to expose test fraud, Captain Rhonda McDaniel of the 45th Aeromedical Dental Squadron faced court-martial for the exact same thing. The scam had been going on for 10 years in the United States and overseas, involving multiple Air Force personnel. Think about that. Kathleen Lipscomb gave her life trying to expose corruption in the military testing system. And after her ending, after her perpetrator was caught and imprisoned, after everything that happened became public knowledge, the fraud continued anyway. The cheating ring Bill created, the fraud that cost Kathleen her life, didn't die with his arrest. It metastasized. Kathleen was a dedicated nurse who spent her career caring for others. She was a loving mother who fought fiercely for her children in a custody battle. She was a daughter and sister whose family refused to let her case go cold. She was a woman who made the fatal mistake of threatening to expose the truth about a man who'd built his entire identity on lies. And now her perpetrator walks free while she remains in the ground. The case shows us something important about justice. Sometimes it works. The careful investigation, the forensic psychology, the brave testimony of a child, the guilty conscience of an accomplice, all of it came together to identify and convict Kathleen's perpetrator. The system worked to bring him to justice. But did it really? When a man who meticulously planned and executed the ending of his children's mother serves only 32 years and walks free while still in his 60s, has justice truly been served? Bill Lipscomb bet that his military training and calculated deception would make him untouchable. He was wrong. Science, psychology, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children's memories proved more powerful than his lies. But in the end, he still won in a way. He's free. He's alive. He gets to experience sunrises and sunsets, holidays and ordinary days, freedom and possibility. Kathleen Lipscomb, the 30-year-old nurse who only wanted to protect her children and expose corruption, has been gone for nearly 40 years. She never got to see Carl and Laura graduate from school. She never got to meet her grandchildren. She never got to grow old. And the man who took all of that from her is walking around somewhere in America right now. That's not the ending any of us wanted to this story, but it's the truth. And unlike Bill Lipscomb, who built his life on lies, the truth is what Kathleen Lipscomb deserves. If you ever find yourself thinking about Kathleen Lipscomb, remember her not as a victim found on a highway, but as a woman who fought for what was right, even when it cost her everything. Remember her as a mother who loved her children so fiercely that from beyond the grave, through her own handwritten words, she helped solve her own case. And remember this: military honor becomes meaningless when it's built on fraud. A uniform and rank mean nothing when the person wearing them is willing to eliminate another human being to keep their secrets hidden. That's the real story of Kathleen Lipscomb. Not just how she was gone, but why she mattered, and why her case continues to matter today.